All right, so I'm doing prep for this. They said, we just want to take you this little tiny topic, like what does work look like with agents? Something small like that. So yeah, I'm your guy. So my name is Joe DosSantos. I am the Vice President of Enterprise Information Management at Workday. And today I'd like to start with a little trip down memory lane. The year is 2012. And Tom Davenport and DJ Patil post this article in the Harvard Business Review. You all read it, right? Of course. Data scientist, it's the sexiest job of the 21st century. That was a short century, wasn't it? I mean, that is remarkable. And it's actually funny. I've had occasion to meet and speak with Tom, and I always tell him, this article set us all back 5 years because we started looking for unicorns. Like there's this guy, he knows SQL, business process, Python, statistics, and I don't know who that is, but we couldn't find them. And then we kind of figured out that it was a team sport. Now, what's going to happen is by the end of this presentation, you'll realize that I was right for calling him wrong, but for all the wrong reasons. Because I think that the future of work in data science is, this is not the future of what we want our people to be. So just to briefly introduce Workday for people that don't know it, we are a software SaaS vendor, focus on HR and finance principally. We do a lot about work. We help people figure out how to do work, and we focus on things like employees' integrity and things like that. So we're about 20 years old, 20,000 employees. And my role is I'm the internal guy. So I am responsible for all of the data that is consumed in the AI strategy inside of Workday. So how do we make sure that we can consume and be smart inside? So I'm gonna describe to people, this is almost like the game we were playing this morning, Is It a Cat? But it's different. So we're gonna talk about whom am I describing? By the way, you have to be totally impressed by my grammar. I didn't even need chat or GPT for that. So we've got these human workers and we've got these agents. And, who's got a role and a title? I won't ask you to kind of do this, the cat game. Who holds a position in the org? Who has to roll up into a position? Who has to have very clear security permissions in terms of that are consistent with that role? Who has goals and incentives? Who has to follow policies that are there for the business, and who has to learn and improve at their job? I think by now the setup this morning has basically gotten through. It's both, right? The actual future of how we think about an agent is not much different from an employee. And I think we think a lot about what does it mean for someone to interpret, to learn, to grow? And at the end of the day, it's just like a person, right? That person has to work within the context of an organizational structure. They have to understand the policies of that. So let's say you're answering the help desk. There are policies in place for when you can call your manager. There are policies in question when you can hang up the phone. There are policies in question, and it's just a question of making sure that these agents learn these things. So at the end of the day, we're kind of moving from this place that it's not copilots anymore, right? And you heard a lot about that this morning. We spent a lot of time with this concept that felt really good to our core, which is they're just going to help us. The little robots, they're just here to help us. Hasn't anyone seen the Terminator, for crying out loud? Yes, but they are here to serve functions, right? So all of those places that we're looking for to do low-cost types of activities, they are going to be done holistically. We had this concept that we talked about, are you building parts of a car or are you building a car? And increasingly what's going to happen is that these agents are going to build cars. They're going to actually fit into that. But as any good process happens, there are things that you want to be happening in different places by fully formed things, and humans will have to redefine those roles. Okay, so I think this is pretty much consistent with what we talked about this morning. And what I wanted to do is highlight a few things what does that mean? How do we start to think about that orchestration? So the first is a remarkable role clarity. So one of the things that is always bedazzling when you watch AI, it's oh my God, that was amazing. But then you have to say who does that job? And the thing that was great about the Acceldata demo here was it's very clear who does that job. There's a person who has this job and this will do this instead. But it's really important, and I would encourage everybody to say, as you're starting to think about some kind of AI that's going to be introduced, what is that person? What is their job? What is their role responsibility? Who is the organization that's accountable for that? And how will they be measured? Just like a person, right? So it's important that we get real good, solid clarity around what their role is. Process excellence. I always think this is funny, like, oh, they can infer and reason. We're all set. How are your coworkers doing at that? Like, it's a mixed bag, isn't it, right? At the end of the day, yes, they will learn, these agents, but the idea of making sure that it's clear what the procedures are in certain circumstances, it's not exactly kind of rigorous in a BPM kind of a way, but you really need to make sure that it's clear about who does what when, because that's how the agent keeps themselves out of trouble. And I always kind of think come back to this idea of a call center. When do you escalate? When do you, what is your call script to talk back? You need to understand what the proper procedure is so you don't break any policies or worse yet, any laws. The third is, of course, security. So, when we come to work, we have security that is hopefully mapped up to the role that we have with respect to the job that we do. And frankly, I'm not sure that companies are great. We're the data people, so we know that people aren't that great at it, right? So John comes in. What's John's job? I don't know. We just hired a guy. Well, what am I supposed to? I don't know. Just give him this role. But what about? And it's a mess, right? That kind of data access is a mess. And I love the idea of like the agent that breaks free. You can't have. It's a mess. It's vague in your security of your agents. It has to be super clear. Especially like, I think it's funny, like we did have a fleeting conversation this morning around how the Trump administration is maybe not as particularly interested in this, but take across the pond, very interested in, right? So there's a lot of serious dedication to making sure that the rules and the security are in place and that we have good clarity around that. And the thing that I think, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on this presentation, that I think it's short shrift is translation. So for people that have done AI projects, agent A usually has to deal with semantic layer A and data store A in this nice little tiny stack, right? And that's particularly true in the structured world, right? And then each new vendor that you see now has its own semantic layer. That's fun. And they have their own agents that speak to their own semantic layers. And so we're kind of doing this whole thing in silos, right? So the secret that's really in front of us is going to be figuring out how to manage the orchestration. And so we saw the NCP in terms of like the protocols. But as you start to think about that, what we saw this morning was like this kind of orchestration that's handled specifically for a process in a workflow. That will get hairy in a second, and I'll tell you why. Stay tuned. Okay. So I thought, what better way to do this than to get with, I'm going to give you an example. So this is actually something that we are doing at Workday. We are deploying a BI agent. Think about it as an AI for BI. So I'm going to follow my own Joe DosSantos axioms. Seems like a good place to start. So who is this persona? So the persona is a business person. In this particular case, it's in sales. And they need some help understanding the next best actions with respect to some of their clients in their pipeline. Okay, cool. We need to make sure that we start off with data product management. So it has been, I guess, somewhat liberating to come to an Acceldata event where we haven't talked a lot about data product management, but can we just acknowledge that it's kind of essential? So one of the dirty little secrets about AI's birth is when we say we're running out of data, we are running out of unstructured data. The world is running out of things. There's only so many times you can figure out why the Titanic sank. There's only time, right? There's only so many times you can use the same data sets for the same stuff. We are almost out of data on the internet. And yet in each of our daily lives, it doesn't feel like we're running out of data, right? It feels like we can barely structure the data that we've got, right? So the secret to being really good at these things is trying to figure out how you can blend the structured and the unstructured world that work on completely different paradigms. And this is where this kind of translation layer becomes important. So we need to make sure that as we're going to crank out some financials, or we're going to crank out some pipeline information or information about the customers, that it's actually governed and correct. That should be a no-brainer. Now, the second part is you also need to have access to the unstructured data because, frankly, that's the easy part now. And there's going to be a theme that I come back to is I can't believe how easy this is. I'm going to show you in a minute a demo. We had a hackathon. And we decided to set people loose on some data, and we had 3 AI agents developed in 2 hours. It's easy, and this is actually part of the problem. It's a little bit too easy, and it can potentially lead to some sprawl, and we'll get to that in a minute too. All right, so an LLM you can trust. It's a short list, but you can do that. And you need the ability to generate graphics, right? So I thought the thing that was shown in the Acceldata thing this morning was great because there is something that's really important about being able to kind of see it in the form of a chart and different kinds of things like that, right? So this is kind of what we want to do. So in short, what we're trying to do is I should be able to ask a question. You should be able to present me with some facts. Then you should be able to interpret what it means. And then you should be able to give me some recommendations and then show me a nice little pretty chart. That seems like a good BI agent, right? Cool. Now, I had a demo I was going to show you. And then I realized it wasn't as fake data as I thought it was. And it seemed like among the data people, that could be career limiting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you some screenshots of what we actually did. So the reason I talked you through those steps is because there are, in fact, 4 different steps to our dialogue. So the first is, how do we actually do something that's going to take my query and convert it from text to SQL? So what you have right now is our prompt here on the bottom looks like a Google search bar, which is basically, asking me a question. And the question is about, tell me where my open pipeline is. The little box there is the simplified anonymization part, but it's very high tech. It's AI because it's in PowerPoint. And so you can see the simple text to query. Great. We use, some Cortex and some Snowflake for that. Life is good. So I've got that. Great. Now, the second part is I'd like you to give me some descriptive analysis about that. So in this particular case, and this is where I realized I was really on thin water because it was like a particular customer was named and what their particular install base. I was like, you don't need to know that. But in this particular case, what happened was it retrieved the customer's install base, their financial situation, how much product they have, what kinds of products they have, what's their install base, what kind of responses have been made recently to campaigns, right? And again, this is just like, I just went out and searched it. This is now starting to blend some of the unstructured data with the structured data. So cool. And then the third thing I want to do is to say, well, that was all great, but what's going on in that customer? And so in order to turn this from something that's informational to something that's prescriptive, this is something that goes through a third-party data source that we buy that says, what's the competitive install base? So it's telling them who else is installed there, what are you fighting against, what do you think your competitive advantages are? It goes through recent research, what have they printed on the internet about what they've said about themselves, and actually starts to say, this is how I think you should measure, this is how I think you should present yourself. We should present ourselves to this customer in this particular situation. Well, that's pretty cool. And then lastly, help me understand, what this looks like. Okay, this is our financial performance at this client. So we've been, had a little bit of a bump up. There's the little waterfall, product breakdown. Great financials, right? So I would like to present to you 2 competing facts that are killing me. So this is 4 different methods, 4 different models, right? It's a mix of Cortex and Claude and all sorts of stuff under the covers, right? 2 weeks is what it took us to do this. So that sounds great, right? How is this orchestrated? It's orchestrated in the app itself, right? The only way for you to know, and I'm like picking apart the team, like, how'd you build that chart? How'd you know it needed to be 4 different panes? Well, that's some Java framing. Well, what if they change the question? Oh, they can't change the question. They can't change the question. I mean, that would be silly. Why? Then they'll come back to us and we'll reframe something else. But I want Google. Turns out this is actually basically an app with a backlog. And so we can't ask anything. Every single thing requires a front-end backlog, which leads you to start to think about the criticality of orchestration. So I said, guys, what we're looking for is, I want to be able to build a data product and mount it. And that's it, right? And right now, the capability for doing that is, let's say, immature. Although there's some people that I've talked to today that might make me believe that maybe it's not as far off as it could be. But at the end of the day, here is what I wanted to kind of share with you if it's not scary. Because on the one hand, it was super, super easy. And on the other hand, we have an experience where we have, when I started at Workday 2 years ago, we had 800 Tableau dashboards. We're going to fix that, right? I've taken a baseball bat to that, and now we have 950. That was some of my finest work right there. So how do we make it so that 950 dashboards just doesn't become 950 agents, right? And so I think that this is going to be the task that lies before us. And I think that what you've seen over and over today is it's so easy. It's so easy to build an agent. It's so easy to plug into an LLM. That's not the problem anymore. And the reason why data scientist is not the sexiest job is because I barely need one. right? I got my Claude, right? Claude's my agent, right? He's fine. And so for the most part, this I think is the challenge for us, that what we need to start to do is to figure out, we've been trying to experiment with different kinds of ways of labeling this. Like, is there a certification? Do you have kind of an agent that's certified and an agent that's not? Do you have to go through certain governance processes? If it's so easy that people can just spin them up, what can we do to actually stop the proliferation of them and make them more useful? So I think that this is going to be our challenge. And I think that the reason I thought that this was an appropriate topic for an Acceldata sanctioned environment is the same principles that we apply to data products, we need to start to apply to agents. Right? What constitutes good? What constitutes right? What kind of inspections do we need to go against to make sure that we feel comfortable about the outcome of this? So right now, I can feel like we can spend all our time trying to make sure that we feel super confident about the content of these data products, and then the agents that go against them, they can actually be completely have wildly different outcomes depending on the humors of the particular person that set that agent loose. So that's my warning sign. So I think that the key here is, how do we start to think about the difference between building an AI agent, which is super easy, as I said, and scaling? So if we want to build an agent, we can get going quickly. And I actually think, lest anyone think that I think this is a bad idea, I actually think it's super good, because at the end of the day, we data people don't speak always the right language. And so you need to speak in the language of a business. You need to deliver on a use case. You need to deliver something, right? So I think that the idea of showing and delivering against a specific use case is not only okay, it's critical. There's a specific user. There are a series of curated questions. I just showed you something that was very specifically curated questions. There's orchestration of what those agents are and what they do that's actually in the app, right? You have carefully planned graphics, but the downside is the next time you get a use case, you're starting from scratch. And I think that what's going to happen in front of us is we're going to start to deal with, how do we start to think about semantic layers that are universal, that help get access to whatever's underneath and orchestrate not only just the ability to call an agent, but actually know which agent to call. Almost, what is that? What wasn't that? Robots, agents managing agents. There's some movie where they talk about AIs managing AIs, but that's basically what we're talking about, right? I think it's going to be this really important point about governance tools and how governance tools start to shift to become semantic tools. You're starting to see it all over the place. That you used to be able to kind of build a product, describe the product, and a BI person would say, "I want to build it." Oh, that's what I need to build. Cool, I have the answer. Agents don't speak Google Sheets or your catalog of choice. We need to figure that out. I think we need the ability to dynamically generate graphics. So the thing you guys showed this morning was really cool, because I'm not sure I know what I need to know, but you need to kind of be able to plug that in. Now, here's the real trick. How do we start thinking about crowdsourcing of semantics? So let's say that I put a data product out there. Forgive me, I think I've given this example 10 times today, where I have a data product that is all of my revenue by customer, and in those customers, it says revenue of the customer and size of the customer. And the question is, what is my revenue average for large enterprise? Well, large enterprise is not a data column that appears there. Large enterprise is an inference of how I'm going to read it. And in the old days, you talk to a BI person and be like, I got you. I'm going to talk to the governance team. We'll nail this down. I want those people to disappear. So who's going to take the place? Some form of integration where you ask a question that's never been answered before, and it has to figure out how to route to the governance and figure out whether you're not right or not. So if you guys, if you're ready for a new breakthrough software idea, that's the one, I think. So, and then the idea also is it's embeddable anywhere, right? You can't just have a React specific dashboard. You just need to be able to call this from wherever you are. Call this thing from Slack. Call this thing from Salesforce. Call this thing from Workday. And that's where you should be doing it. So at the end of the day, what I would say is you should feel that you've seen everything you need to do the thing on the left right now. And we as a community, I think, are on a journey to figure out the thing on the right, because I think we figured it out for data products. Now we need to figure out for AI products as well. So in summary, I think we need to think about agents, people. Agents are just people. They need love too. They can just work 24 hours a day. So sorry about that. But they need all the same things. So start thinking about the introduction of agents being the same thing as the introduction of a person with a thing to do and all that. The second part is, if you didn't get that whole part about orchestration, it is the crux of everything. The agent can do anything. Give it the rules, give it the data, and it will do the thing that you ask. But usually they're discrete. Like in the Acceldata demonstration, you saw that it was basically a kind of a composite service. Like in the old SOA days, you used to say like, oh, it's a microservice, but then you can string them together. So how do we start to think about the reasoning of how to string together agents, right? And then lastly, the future is semantics. So governance is now starting to shift radically from the idea of documenting what things mean into the ability for the agents to actually understand what's sitting below. So these are the things that are in front of us as a series of professionals, and we will go out and conquer them together, but this is what we're working on. Here endeth the lesson.